And now, our feature presentation.
As a boy, he was always different. No one understood him.
You ready for it, boy? It's time to take your medicine.
Thank you, sir.
No one could control him.
Go inside, honey.
But now, it's a new beginning. The beginning of the end for Freddy.
Every town has an Elm Street. Oh, screaming while the bus is in motion. It's your mind or go for it. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too.
We're gonna have to hit him with everything we've got.
Now I'm playing with power.
We're in Twin Peaks here.
It's gotta be me and him.
You want to live? Hey, what's up? What's with kids today, huh?
Freddy's dead. The final nightmare.
Great graphics.
They saved the best for last.
The very first film I worked on was Polyester, which I was a production assistant on with John Waters. And I met the people at New Line at that point, and they invited me up to work to New York to work on the film Alone in the Dark, which Jack Shoulder directed, and also to be a PA. But they had so little money and there were so few people involved that they turned me into the accountant. The theory being that because I'd done a math major at Yale, that obviously I knew stuff about accounting. I knew nothing about accounting. I knew nothing. I mean, being a math major means you know nothing about anything practical mathematically, you know. So, but the theory was that I could figure out how to be the accountant. So I went and sort of figured it out at the last minute, and you know, was playing around with ledger books, having no clue, but sticking things in presumably somewhere near the correct column. And at that point, I created a relationship with Bob Shea, and he seemed to really like me, because I was the unpaid production assistant who then came back on Hairspray to produce it. So, and then produced Hairspray and Crybaby. So I'm very funny. I mean, it's the two part of my growth process. It's like half of my reputation is Nightmare, and the other half is the John Waters films. And I didn't feel that working in New York was going to work out. It was just too difficult. There were about 2 movies happening a year there. And so I decided it was time for me to move to L.A. So I went out to L.A. I was working for Roger Corman and having my own career when New Line started making Nightmare, picked up the Nightmare script. And they called me up and said, we really want somebody who we know and we trust to be the accountant on this film. So would you like to do it? And they sent me the script, and I thought, this is the scariest script I've ever read. And at that point, there were a lot of horror films going around. and they all seem to be the same project over and over again. You know, you go to school and you hack a bunch of people up. And I read this and I thought, God, this is amazing. It's so scary. And I couldn't sleep that night, making my husband like laugh at me completely. And I think the image that scared me the most personally was the girl in the school hallway in the body bag. I just couldn't get that image out of my head. So I knew that this was a winner of a script. Yes, what if Nightmare 2 is homoerotic, what is Nightmare 6? In terms of my directing the film, I had decided that this is something I really wanted to do. I had worked with enough directors and been producing long enough that I had such a passion for the project. And I had just come off producing the film Book of Love, which Bob Shaye had directed. And I thought, well, now's the time. If he, you know, it's hard for him to say, I can be a first-time director, Rach, but you can't. And I thought, well, I've got to do everything I can to get the ammunition together to say, you've got to let me do this. Freddy is elemental. I mean, there's something completely elemental about the entire series and about Freddy himself. And I think because we spent so much time developing the scripts on Part 3 and Part 4 and Part 5 and Part 6, I had to really analyze a lot what we saw. And I think, first of all, your dreams are just completely elemental. And somebody where the blurring between dreams and reality is terrifying. And I think that's just elemental for everyone. Because when you have a scary dream and you don't know what's true and what isn't, that's just completely elemental. So the concept of Nightmare was absolutely brilliant. And then what we were doing to take it to the next level, and I think Chuck and Frank started it with Nightmare 3, was bringing out some humor and some accessibility and turning the movie more into a date movie in addition. So you've got your what's dreams, what's reality, really, really scary stuff. And then you've got your question of, well, how do you then relieve the audience as well? How do you make them laugh? For me, what I enjoyed during the development process of all the early films was that at a certain point we're just saying, how do we take a nightmare? What am I most scared of? And I always felt like I was the person who was best to do this because I'm scared of so many things. I was the most frightened child there ever was. I was frightened of everything. I couldn't watch anything on horror when I was a kid. So I could say, oh yeah, you know, I had a fear of spiders, and I had a fear of elevators, and I had a fear of airplanes, and all those things. Then we would say, and how do we take them on, how do we twist them? So if you have a fear of cockroaches, then the issue is not, you know, how do we make a zillion cockroaches? That's the cliched version of it. The uncliched version of it is turning the girl in Nightmare 4 into the cockroach. Robert is a wonderful actor. And he was hired. I mean, there was absolutely conscious conversation that this is not just a man in a mask when he was hired on Nightmare 1. A really good actor and molding a mask to the actor so the actor could act. And Robert brought so much to the movement and all that. I mean, all that's obvious because we put all these people in masks to do stunt doubles and you can tell. None of them can move like Freddy, no matter how good they are. None of them are Freddy. You can't put someone else in the mask. They just aren't Freddy. When I was working with Johnny Depp on the half day that he did his cameo, and I had asked Johnny personally, will you do this for me? I just worked with him on Cry Baby, and I'd worked with him on Nightmare 1. So, and it seemed like a perfect job for him to parody himself by doing a public service announcement, and he was totally into it. But even talking to him, I was terrified. And I remember saying to him, you know, just be dripping with teen sincerity, and him looking at me like, what the hell do you mean? And I'm thinking, oh God, what else can I say? This is terrifying. I think some of the fear factor is, you know, what I've learned in directing a lot more now is just, you know, how to communicate with the actors without being frightened of them. And the minute they get scared, then you're, and I was frightened of, I mean, working with Roseanne Arnold, working with Tom Arnold, who was had no experience and was just this huge, I mean, he's just huge, larger than life character. And trying to take somebody like that and bring them down while you feel like, I don't know do I know how to do this? And do I have a strong enough point of view? And I could have used more experience from that point of view. And if you'd asked me in those days that this would become my life for the next 6-7 years, and that there would be 7 of them and I would work on 6 of them, and I would have told you, you're out of your mind. I mean, absolutely out of your mind. There's no way. This was just one of a million horror films going around, and I wanted to continue my relationship with New Line.